Good evening, Josh.
Good evening, James.
How are you doing on this glorious evening, my good sir?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Been in and out of the sick ward for the week.
Mm.
So sorry if I have a really, really bad cough at times because I cough when I talk. But other than that, I'm having a swell time and I'm back. We're both back in our original houses after two very eventful spring breaks. And we got football to talk about. So makes me feel a little bit better.
And for sure. And both of us didn't get arrested during our own
Yeah.
spring breaks, which is a huge bonus.
I mean,
So,
yeah. You could say that. No,
uh,
I'm just kidding.
no,
But
we're here. Yeah, we're here for y'all. And just like last week, we were actually doing the opposite. We're doing our, kind of reactions to some of the signings of the NFC teams.
yeah, just a quick walkthrough, man. I mean, that's we had a lot. We had a lot to discuss. This is probably going to be another long episode. Free agency still goes on. There hasn't been a lot of like crazy moves afterwards from the initial hype, but we're kind of rooted in a place where now we're looking towards the draft, and more draft content will come out before the draft. But however, we got a lot to talk about today, so I'm excited to dive into this. We got a lot of NFC teams, kind of same thing, high or low. But I guess and actually, I'm going to say something because I didn't say anything about this last time. I have the lessons of free agency, and I've been putting this for a couple weeks. Is this guy right behind me? Josh, can you tell me who that is?
That is big A. Albert Hainsworth signed the biggest contract at the time for a defensive lineman, and is most notably famous of him completely giving up on Michael Vick's 6 touchdown pass that game or something crazy
He was the
like that.
first ever player to sign a contract worth over $100 million. And he is one of the worst free agent busts of all time. Classic Commanders. I mean, if you're a Commanders fan, Redskins fan, you know that they are not the best at free agency. They have had a lot of bad free agency luck. But hopefully that's not the case this year. I'm supporting you guys, but I guess there's two lessons. It's one, sometimes free agency ends up like this guy, and two, Commanders are never usually that good at getting players in free agency, but that could change. So without further ado, let's get this ship sailed on NFC teams in free agency. If you don't mind, I'll start off with the first team.
Perfect.
We're going to go with the Arizona Cardinals. This one, to me, is very similar to what we talked about last time with the Jets. I'm looking at their signings, and I'm like, okay, I get some of these. I like some of these. We'll kind of walk through it. Couple of retains, Jonah Williams, their kicker and punter, blah, blah, blah. Elijah Wilkinson, Andrew Wingard, I like. I think that's a good depth piece. I know he's kind of a Jaguars legend of sorts. Sorry about that. Kendrick Bourne's a fine weapon, kind of in rotation. The three biggest ones. Roy Lopez, I like this contract a lot. He was a pleasant surprise for Detroit. Guy who was expected to get more than this, but didn't. It's a decent amount of money for high upside players. Same thing with Tyler Algier. This is interesting because I wasn't expecting them to go for a running back, and their running back room is heavily mediocre. You got James Conner, Trey Benson, and Tyler Algier. It's like almost three of the same exact guys in the one room. And then their biggest one, and my favorite, is signing Isaac Somalo, a veteran offensive lineman, really solid player. They desperately need interior offensive line help. He's an immediate plug-and-play starter, immediate upgrade. The only thing I'd say is the reason I say it's like the Jets is what is the game plan with these signings? You missed out on a lot of big players in free agency. This Cardinals team needs big-time players. They had a ton of money. They had money to spend. You want to go out, get big-time players. You're kind of in this rebuilding stage. You let go of Kyler Murray. Maybe we're going to go for Malik Willis. You don't get Malik Willis. Okay. You don't get all the big-name guys. So you get all these smaller-name guys, and this really looks like the signings of a team that's looking to take the next steps, looking to take that from being good into being contention. And quite frankly, that's not Arizona. These guys I'm just struggling to find what their identity this season is actually going to be. Because some of these signings, like I said, I don't mind. The one I didn't mention that I don't like is Gardner Minshew. Why? You have Jacoby Brissett. Go and get a quarterback in the. Why are you even thinking about this? I hate that signing. I just do not like it. I gave the Cardinals a C- because I like some of their signings. I think some of them are quality, kind of high upside guys. this doesn't really make them like you're looking at the teams that have like in the same category, the Titans, the Raiders, teams that needed to win big, make these big developments. They're not in this position. They don't have a quarterback. This isn't helping them out. I'm just very confused in the identity of this team.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It's so interesting. There's a few points I want to make. First of all, they lose their biggest free agent, Jalen Thompson, safety to the
Yeah,
Cowboys, was a 3-year, 33 million, and to replace that safety production, you go and get Andrew Wingard, who, as a Jags fan, is nothing more. Honestly, is a average to below average starting safety. So it's little things like signing a player like Tyler Algier, who is an upgrade to James Conner and Trey Benson, but that 2 years, 12 million, is that worth that upgrade, or could they have used that money to a different position to get? Because
right.
there's a lot of holes on this roster. I mean, linebacker, D line, you now have a hole at safety, your offensive tackle, your wide receiver. So it's very interesting. Quarterback, even they kind of just went out and signed guys I think they liked, regardless of position that they need. Now, Isaac Samalo is a guy that's going to start, and yes, he's 33, 34, and 3 years is a lot of money for a guy that's going to be close to 40 by the end of his contract, but he is a really good starting guard. Roy Lopez is a fantastic contract, but like Kendrick Bourne on 2 years, how much does he really like push? Is he that much better than Greg Dortch? Should they let go? Things like that. So they upgraded spots. There's still a lot of stuff they need to do. So I kind of agree with you there for sure.
All right. All right, man. Well, a very interesting start. On to the next. And another
Yeah.
team that I know we have a lot of questions about, and that is
hmm
the Atlanta Falcons. Josh, why don't you dive in on them?
Yeah. Another team that's kind of confusing. You look based on their two biggest players that they got with contract value, and it's Nick Folk, a kicker, and Jake Bailey, a punter. And I'll say this: special teams can truly win you or lose you some games, but they should not be your two highest priorities going into free agency with a team that has so many holes like the Falcons. Receiver is such a huge issue, and they got Zachunas over there, but I mean, he doesn't quite produce what Darnell Mooney had a few years. Austin Hooper is their fourth, highest value contract to be, your backup tight end. Once again, they had some depth D line, Cam Thomas, Deshaun Han, Samson Ebukam, but truly there's not a whole lot. Aziz Ashilari. But I mean, the biggest thing here is the signing of Tua. What does he bring to that quarterback room? Does he start early in the
Yeah.
season while Michael Penix comes back from injury? It, this is a free agency class that would fit perfectly with a team that is ready to compete, that had issues with special teams. That's not what the Falcons are. And yes, they were 9-8, and yes, they've been so mediocre for so long. But special teams isn't what's going to boost them up to that next spot.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I like the Nick Folk. He was a fantastic kicker last year. It's just weird. It's just you're bringing on bodies. You're looking for diamonds in the rough when you talk about all those defensive line ads. To his vet minimum. I like the idea.
Mhm.
Michael Penix, a little rough. To his put in another lefty quarterback. The guy, same system. If Michael Penix doesn't work, at least you kind of have Tua. Maybe could get you a couple wins or something. But it just screams like inactivity in a place where you're looking to get over the hump, and you look at this division, right? This entire division got better. I
Mhm.
mean, the Saints, Carolina. You could even say that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers spent more money on players, and in my opinion, they didn't have the best free agency as much either. This team, yeah, I mean, one of your highest value contract is Jahan Dotson,
Yeah.
right? He's not going to replace. I mean, 2 years, $50 million. It's a lot for a guy who is a wide receiver 3 to wide receiver 4. They still don't have a wide receiver 2. They have issues in their secondary. You don't know what's happening with James Pierce. There's a lot of question marks going into this season. And, adding Tua adds more questions to those question marks. And honestly, I don't like a lot of the signings. I can respect the special teams upgrades because that was something desperately they needed. So I'm putting it right in the ballpark with Arizona. I'm going with a D plus C minus. Just not a big fan.
No, for sure.
All right, now on to the next. And another NFC South, someone I just mentioned, and that is the
Hmm.
Carolina Panthers. And we're doing a complete 180 here. Holy crap. Wow. What a big free agency for them. A lot of signings. There are a lot of really good value signings. I will say this. I really like the Luke Fortner signing. He was really
Yep.
solid when he played in New Orleans. You get him for less than $5 million for a year, kind of a prove it deal. You could still draft a center or bank on his upside. I like that. Kenny Pickett, bring him in as maybe a backup quarterback. That's not crazy. The two favorites, Rasheed Walker, super surprising. I thought he was going to get a ton of money, up to 10 million. I think it's 4 million base salary. There's a lot of
Hmm.
incentives. I was not the biggest fan of him getting a massive contract because, from my perspective, he was a middle of the pack offensive tackle. But I think this is a perfect replacement for Akem Aquano, who's not going to probably play next season. He's a reliable pass protecting offensive tackle who is just kind of a plug and play kind of, hey, you're getting another chance. Can you prove yourself? Because I mean, why I think this happened is last year's contract of Dan Moore and
Yep.
how of an abomination that was. And Rasheed Walker's not as bad as Dan Moore. I'll give him respect, but he sure she shouldn't be on a contract like Dan Moore. That's too much of a risk. Panthers, bang for your buck signing there. Another bang for your buck signing. Sorry about that. Devin Lloyd, 3 years, 45 million, 25 million. Again, I can just not believe the value. You look at Quay Walker's contract compared to Devin Lloyd's contract. Devin Lloyd is making a couple million more than Quay Walker, and he was a second team All Pro linebacker. This is a dream case scenario. This is a slam dunk signing for them. There's obvious questions of his best year came in his contract year, but still, the Panthers were desperate at linebacker. You go and get one of the best players in the class, an immediate plug and play inside linebacker. The one I have a lot of questions about is obviously Jalen Phillips. I understand you need to address the edge room. I think Jalen Phillips is a very explosive player. Has very high upside. When he's on the field, he's a very big time disruptive player. But you're paying 30 million a year for a guy who has been consistently injured and was at one point forced to medically retire. He's torn his Achilles a couple times, ACL tears, constant injuries. This is a massive risky investment. I like that you're able to bring on a guy like Jalen Phillips to immediately upgrade that edge room, but that's a massive contract with a ton of risk. I'm not the biggest fan of. This just kind of screams like something's going to happen, and I really don't want it to because I think Jalen Phillips, when he's on the field, is a fantastic player. I would give this an A plus if I had the chance, but I really just do not like this Jalen Phillips contract, although I think he has the upside to be a unbelievable player on that Carolina defense. But overall, I got to give him an A minus. I think they did a fantastic job with some of these really high value contracts for really, really rock solid players.
Yeah, I like a lot of their decisions, as well as they went out and they got someone like John Menchie, kind of banking on a little bit of that potential still. Evan Lloyd, I mean, 3 years, 42 to 45 million. That's a fantastic contract. As someone that his skill set and like watched him play for the last 4 years, he can fit in so many different varieties of defensive schemes because of how versatile he is in both the run game, the pass coverage, and he's one of the best tacklers. He will fit in here
Yeah.
perfectly. Rasheed Walker, I mean, Ike Kwanu might not play at all this season because of that injury, so that's a perfect left tackle replacement. Um,
Excuse me.
but it's that Jalen Phillips, man. I I guess it's something we would never really know, but I wonder if there was a true like bidding war. And because I think everyone kind of sees that Jalen Phillips got a lot more than what it was predicted. And I wonder if there was a full on bidding war and it got to a point where, 120 million was just the final thing that because of all the cap room, they were able to, give him the final number instead of anyone else. I mean, 30 million is a lot for a guy that had a good year last year, but the sack production is not there. It will help a lot in the run stuffing ability, but this is one of those type of contracts that could really bite them in the butt, especially if they're looking down the road at a potential quarterback extension and Bryce Young.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's definitely an upgrade. So I'm right there with you, kind of an A minus B plus range.
Perfect. Same wavelengths. We're cruising on this thing. And then speaking of cruising, you got the Chicago Bears. I have a
Yeah.
couple thoughts on this one. I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, Chicago Bears, interesting. Looking through their contracts, Kobe Bryant was their biggest one. I've got a 3-year, 40 million. I love Kobe Bryant as a player. He's someone that's so versatile in that back end. Played so many different positions for Seattle, both corner, slot, and safety. So he's a player that's going to immediately be don't necessarily want to say an upgrade, but will be a day one starter. Hit on the D line, Naval Goldman at that D tackle spot, a desperate position that they needed. Cam Lewis, corner, re-signed Case Keenum. Braxton Jones is a player that I really like that they re-signed. Honestly, $5 million for 1 year is a lot cheaper than I kind of expected for a left tackle with experience. But other than that, they didn't do a whole lot of signings. That Kobe Bryant, I like him as a player. Looking at the big picture, they could have easily retained Jaquan Brisker and
Yeah.
Kevin Byard last year for cheaper and still have more money for someone else. So
Yeah.
that's a situation that's interesting to look into. Jaquan Brisker was a 1 year, like 9 million. Kevin Byard was a 1 year, 8 million for the Patriots, something like that, maybe
Yeah.
5 million. Other than that, it's a lot of money for a player that you're banking on who's a little bit younger than both of those players. With that being said, I'm giving, Bears about C plus. They still have some holes. Um, Drew Allman retiring, so center is still another big hole that they have. I do like the idea that they had going into this offseason.
Yeah. I have a little, I guess I would say different kind of
Mm-hmm.
wavelength in the Bears. You look at they did lose a lot,
Yep.
DJ Moore, Drew Dahlman, both their starting safeties. They lost Tremaine Edmonds. So there's a lot to replace. You don't have Ozzie Trapilo probably for next year. Braxton Jones, I know he's not the biggest. I know Bears fans don't love him that much, but him and then also bringing in Jedrick Willis, who is coming back. That's a name we haven't heard in a long time. Get a little tackle battle. I don't mind that. Garrett Bradbury, the theme of this is it just seemed like plugging in holes. I don't think they really improved their roster. I think they plugged a lot of holes in relatively risky positions. Like you said, Kobe Bryant. I like Kobe Bryant. This is probably my favorite signing for them. It's a lot of money thrown at one safety when you still have another, safety spot you need to kind of add to. Another one I don't think you mentioned was bringing in Devin Bush, linebacker for
Mm-hmm.
Cleveland. 3 years, 30 million. Bush was fantastic last year, but the question is that because of the Jim Schwartz scheme? Or has he had gone through a career resurgence? Because a lot of people, Devin Bush has been very good at times recently, but also has been really bad and has had a lot of concerns. So putting 10 million a year on a guy, 3 years, 30 million, playing next to TJ Edwards, I wouldn't necessarily call it an upgrade to Tremaine Edmonds, but I would say risky, rewarding kind of thing. Maybe he can replicate that. I do like the Neville Gallimore signing. Again, adding bodies in your defensive tackle room. And then there's the Garrett Bradbury trade. Again, certainly a downgrade to Drew Dahlman. It's going to be really interesting to see if they draft a center or draft some interior offensive linemen. Because this one, it just seemed like a desperate fix, which they kind of needed to do. So overall, I think I gave it kind of your range, C plus. I think you look at the bigger picture. Yeah, these are some of these ads are decent, but you look at they're plugging in holes with guys that I'm fine with. I'm not in love with. There's some upgrade plugins, there's some downgrade plugins, but there's still a lot they need to work on. And I mean, the positions I think of are defensive line. You haven't addressed that. You also haven't addressed, you still need another safety in the secondary. And another one that is sneaky that I could definitely see is receivers. I think I mentioned this earlier, but without DJ Moore, your starting 3 receivers are Roma Dunze, Luther Burden, and Jade Walker. And that's it. And I mean, Khalif Raymond, who's your special teamer. So that's going to be something they have to address as well. So they still have a lot of work to do, but I do like some of these signings. So overall, I give it a CC plus.
Yeah. No, I'm right around that range as well.
Whew. All right. Right. On to the next. How about those freaking Cowboys, dude? How about
Oof.
those Cowboys? Again, another really interesting one. There's a lot. There's a lot with this one. First of all, I'm gonna kind of talk about the Rashawn Gary trade. Yeah, I mean, I don't mind it, I guess, from my perspective. I know for the Cowboys, you need bodies in there. Rashawn Gary is basically your pass rusher number two, rotational pass rusher. He's cannot be your pass rusher one, at least from my personal experience. You saw how he played at the back end of last year when kind of everything was on him. You're kind of giving him a ton of money. It's a risky trade, but I think that it does have some reward to it. I still think he could be a quality rotational defensive lineman, and you need to add bodies to that defense. I do like the Jalen Thompson contract, 3 years, $33 million. Pretty underrated safety for Arizona with their tandem. That's an immediate upgrade. The one I didn't like, but I understand, is trading Osa Odigizua to the 49ers. It's a big loss. I get it. You're retaining Kenny Clark, but you're losing a really solid pass rushing defensive tackle. You had that basically the best defensive tackle duo in the league for about a year and a half a year. And so he's gone. So that'll be interesting. But really just some quiet signings. I think PJ Locke could be underrated. I think he's a really quality depth safety. I mean, Kobe Durant's not a starting corner, but he's a rock solid depth corner. I think this defense still has a ton of work. You bring in some guys who can play. But it's a lot of rotational guys. I don't see a lot of big time quality starters. The only people I could see that is Jalen Thompson and maybe Rashawn Gary. If anything, you lost a bigger starter than both of them in Osa Odigizua. So I think they're really banking on the draft to get some big time players. They still do not understand how they haven't addressed linebacker yet. Like, that is a big concern if you're going into the season with Kenneth Murray still as your starting linebacker. No disrespect to Kenneth Murray, but
And I
you know,
know Overshown should be fully healthy by then as well, but still.
still. So there's still a lot of concern I have. I just don't know if they did enough, but I do like some of the signings that they have. And that's kind of a consistent thing so far. I'm going to give this a C. I'm just not in love with it.
Yeah, I agree. I hate to say I keep on agreeing with you every time, but um, I do like some of the trade or some of the acquisitions that they made. I do love everything that they did prior to free agency opening up.
Right.
Javonte Williams on a 3-year, $24 million deal. That's a fantastic value for a guy that was so productive last year. I mean, he's getting significantly less than Etienne and Kenneth Walker, and he's right up there with them for sure. George Pickens with a franchise tag is getting paid right under 27.5 million. I mean, you look over to what Jason got earlier, last week or this week, and
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my
I mean,
goodness.
the difference in the money does not correlate with the difference of the player. They're both fantastic players, so that's a really good deal that they got that franchise tag obviously before the extension. Um, I mean, that Rashawn Gary trade, I think it's a player they gave up a little too much for a player that was not necessarily that great, and it's a position that they think just really need to find someone. They kind of overpaid. I think they could have been one of the teams that were really bidding in with Jalen Phillips. I like the PJ Locke as
Yeah.
signing a lot. I think that's a guy that when he has been able to play for the Broncos the last few years, he's really excelled. Brandon Aubrey as well, give him a second round tender, really making it hard for any other team to grab him. While he's also only playing on a over 5.5 million per year, which I mean he could easily be double digits for sure. But
Yeah.
even all that, there's still a lot of positions that they did not go for, especially in linebackers. So I'm right there with you. I might even boost it up to about B off season.
Oh, wow. Generous Josh. Yeah. Well, on to another NFC North team, the Detroit Lions. Josh, why don't you take a crack at that one?
Yeah. Man, they not my favorite. Not my favorite.
Oh,
We talked about the David Montgomery trade. Now they got back a 4th-round pick, a 7th, and a Drew Shrugs, who I thought maybe they could potentially see him starring at center, and then they go again, Cade Mays. 3 or 25 million. I think that's one of the best deals so far
I
we've had in
agree.
free agency.
Yeah.
Cade Mays is such a fantastic center. So 3 years, 25 million. That's amazing. Other than that, Isaiah Pacheco, he's just been just worse and worse since his rookie year. Greg Dortch doesn't really move the needle much. Tyler Conklin, just a depth piece. Then you have some offensive line, depth pieces, Ben Barch, Larry Borum. Defensively, they were able to re-sign like Malcolm Rodriguez, who was really good. Rocky Sin, who played a lot for him. But DJ Wanham, Damian Clark, Roger McGarry, Rocky Sin, all these players could maybe get a few snaps every game, but there wasn't anyone really on this like group of signings other than Cade Mays that to me is really worth much. So I'm right there. I'm, kind of at a C plus, because there's just a lot of players I don't think are really going to move the needle that much.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of agree with you. It seems, we don't talk about this prior. Keep in mind, but I understand where you're coming from. Kate May's signing is arguably one of the best signings in free agency. Really, you saw the center market was getting him for only 14 million guaranteed as a probably above average center in the market is really good. Isaiah Pacheco, I like it a little bit more because to me, there's a lot of low risk, high reward scenarios here. Christian Eason, Roger McCreary. You need to add depth to that secondary. You have no idea what's going on with them. There's a whole slew of issues. So those guys could possibly come in, plug and play, be average starters. Conklin, same thing, good depth tight end. Larry Borum, good depth offensive tackle. But I understand where you're coming from. Does this move the needle? No. It seems like they're planning for a lot of contingent backup plans with certain things. You saw how many times, that team got injured, how they got beat up. But I still have a lot of questions. You look at positional wise, there's still questions on that offensive line. Specifically, you have tackle concerns and even interior offensive line concerns, even when you add Cade Mays. But defense too, extra pass rush. DJ Wanham is not your pass rusher number 2. Linebacker, Jack Campbell will be your replacement guy. He's unbelievable. But Alex Anzalone was a really high quality starter and was a fantastic leader for this team. You need linebacker. The biggest question I have is secondary. Like I said, I think the Christian Eason and Roger McCreary signings are good signings for what they are. They're depth signings with low risk, high reward potential. But Brian Branch is probably going to be out for a very long time. Kirby Joseph, you have no idea what's going on with him. Terrion Arnold has had a lot of issues. Ennis Rakasa has played, I think, like 2 games in his 3-year career. And so that leaves you with DJ Reed. So I'm kind of in the same boat. I do like the signings that they made because I think they're very valuable. I think they're really, really good value signings. But there's still a lot of roster questions. So I'm going to say like a B minus in my opinion. I don't think it's a C because I do like the signings that they made. So I'll give it a B minus.
Yeah, I think this offseason is really looking towards extending a lot of their key players.
Yes.
Jack Campbell, especially like him, Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, the 3 guys that they have to re-sign or give an extension to really soon. I think this is kind of what it's looking towards.
Yeah, you got to play money for that. When you have Jared Goff as your quarterback. So yeah, and speaking of the teams, another NFC North team in the building, we got the Green Bay Packers, and I could talk about this one for a while, but I have a lot of explanations. Yeah, I'm iffy. I'm so. I'm kind of in the ballpark of what we've been talking about for a little bit with these NFC North teams, and it's that they lost a lot of players. Romeo Doubs, Quay Walker, Nate Hobbs, Rasheed Walker,
Rashawn Gary.
Romeo, and you look at that at face value and you say, wow, they're not the same. I hear me out. You got to hear me out. When I look at this roster, I see that they have made contingency plans for players to step into those roles. The question is it's risky. You look at Romeo Doubs, they were not going to pay him that much money, especially when you bring on Matthew Golden. That's an immediate replacement right there. That makes sense. Rasheed Walker, it's an interesting one. It's Jordan Morgan. Not the biggest fan of him, especially at offensive guard, but he did play his best games when he did play offensive tackle. So it's really risky, but you could see where they're going with it. Nate Hobbs was just a cap casualty. Rashawn Gary, same thing. Elton Jenkins, they had no room. You brought in Aaron Banks. You re-signed Sean Ryan. He wasn't going to stay. The only one, but again, I just think it's risky business. The Sean Ryan contract, I like them bringing him back, but it's a lot of money for a guy who has played about 7 games as a center. Um, he's a good offensive lineman who is very versatile, but again, very risky contract. But I think they really needed to bring him back because they were going to lose a lot of other players. I like them bringing back some of the depth guys like Chris Brooks, Darian Kennard, a couple of special teams aces. The one I am a little worried about, which I hope works out, but I don't know, is the kind of the swap of Quay Walker for Zaire Franklin. A lot of Packers fans kind of look at this. We weren't going to pay Quay Walker, and I know we're saying that much
I do
money.
the same thing.
We weren't going to pay him that much money. It's a ton of money for a guy who, to me, is just is still in a very raw phase. You have Edgerrin Cooper, who I think is a better linebacker. Zaire Franklin, you're getting him really for not much. Colby Wooden was a depth defensive tackle who was okay. But the thing is that you look at this, right? Zaire Franklin, you're paying him like $8 million, nothing crazy. It's actually a decent amount of money, but he was the third worst ranked linebacker in football last year. He was he turned from a Pro Bowler to the third worst ranked linebacker in the league last year. Honestly, obviously, I'm rooting for him. You know, I want to support him, but that's risky business. When you talk about their signings, I do like their signings. I like what they signed. Sky Moore, you really haven't had a special teams ace ever. So it's good that you finally decide to bring someone on. You know, Mecole Hardman did not work, so I'm hoping this one's a little bit better. Benjamin St-Juste, I think, is a fantastic value signing. He's certainly not your corner one, but he was really good when he played. He's a fantastic zone coverage corner. Gannon runs a ton of zone coverage. He's an excellent depth piece, a cornerback. And then finally, Javon Hargrave, you don't see them signing veterans a lot. And so I was really surprised that they signed him. Another body in the defensive tackle room. Again, former guy, best years under Gannon. He is older, coming off of an okay season in Minnesota, but you need bodies in that defensive tackle room, can complement Devontae Wyatt pretty well. I like the signings. I just think they are really banking on their kind of process with how they were going to replace certain people to see how this team could change. Because honestly, this batch of guys is not the guys you were going to extend. It's going to be the guys like Tucker Kraft, Christian Watson, you know, Xavier McKinney, Evan Williams, Javon Bullard, Edgerrin Cooper. So you have a lot of those guys on the books for the future. So I get that makes sense, and I get that's a priority. So I think it's risky business, but I do understand where they're coming from. So I think I give it like a C+.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, they threw a lot of money out there for arguably people that are a little bit outside their prime. Looking a lot at Javon Hargrave, and they had taken and consumed some of that contract of Zaire Franklin. The one I do really like the Sky Moore contract and what he could really bring in special teams. We saw the 49ers. He had multiple big time returns at big key aspects of games after that trade. Sean Ryan, it's a lot of money, especially when we just talk about how good of a player and how good of a contract Kate Mays obtained from the Lions.
Yep.
So I hate to compare contracts and especially players, but that's something to kind of look into. Benjamin St-Juste is a player that's started his career off rough and then had a good resurgence with the Chargers last year. Really good zone corner. This is, but really had high potential of being a really good signing. But honestly, like I'm kind of right there with you. Nothing excites me with this class. And I think that kind of just goes to say with the extensions that could be potentially coming up. But, you know, C-, C, nothing surprising in any negative or positive way.
Yeah, it seems like both of our teams have not had the most wild free agencies. But speaking of a wild free agency, we got the LA Rams. Josh, walk us through this doozy.
Gosh, okay. We talked about Trent McDuffie, that insane trade with the Chiefs. Got a first-round pick, a fifth, and a sixth, as well as a 2027 third-rounder, and then immediately sign him and make him the highest-paid corner. It's what they need. I mean, this is a Rams team that's ready to compete right now. You have an aging MVP quarterback who may only have a year or two left, and your biggest need with corners, and you go get Trent McDuffie, and then you double up with another Chiefs corner and you get Jalen Watson. 3 year, $51 million. Jalen Watson is one of the most underrated corners, and this is a fantastic signing on, especially banking not only on his potential, but knowing his scheme and bringing in his, teammate with Trent McDuffie, I love that. Other than that, they didn't do a whole lot. They went and re-signed their guys. Cameron Curl, Tyler Higbee. An interesting one to me is Ronnie Rivers, running back. This just happened recently. I don't know what they're going to do with Jaquaz Hunter, the running back
Yeah.
that they received was they traded up in the fourth round, I believe, last year, and he was the only rookie running back that was drafted that did not receive a single carry. So
Hmm.
by bringing in another running back to already Kyron Williams and Blake Corum, I don't know what they're going to do with Jaquaz Hunter. Really, really interesting. But they got what they needed. I mean, I don't see how you can look at this offseason, especially Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, Cameron Curl, and not give him an A plus. I know they gave a lot for Trent McDuffie, but this is a team that's shown that they are able to win and rebuild through the draft, even with the F them picks mentality. So to me, this is an A.
Yeah, I mean, this has got to be one of the best because their motto is, they're banking on the now. Stafford's
Mhm.
probably got 1 or 2 more years left. They're running out of time with things. Obviously, you look at the present day, this is a nail. Like the Kansas City Rams combination, bringing in the Kansas City corner room. Jalen Watson contract's great, high upside, cheaper than Alontae Taylor, like the contract. McDuffie, we talked about it. There are always risks with trading a lot of capital for corners. But the Rams, after the masterclass they pulled earlier, have the capabilities to do so. And I'm a huge Trent McDuffie fan. I love his game. And then obviously, I think really unsung is bringing back Cameron Curl, who has been fantastic since signing with them, being able to maintain him. And this secondary went from being their biggest weakness to arguably one of their biggest strengths. There's not a lot of weaknesses on this team, and they still have draft capital to go and get players. It's an A plus. Obviously, though, you look down the line, it's a totally different story. If they don't have Matt Stafford, and they have a lot of guys, a lot of young, promising players that they're going to have to pay. I'm looking at Puka. I'm looking at their defensive line.
Oh, their defense lines, almost all of them are going to be gone next year, or at least a handful of them. You can't resign. I hate to steal this from you, but you can't resign Brandon Fisk, Bowie Turner, Brian Young, and Jared Verse all at the same time.
Yeah. So but you look at their philosophy, you look at what they're looking for. This is exactly what you need to do if you're going to say, listen, we want to win it all and we're going to maximize our greatest weakness. Yeah, I'm right with you. A plus.
No, for sure.
Oh boy. Okay. Final NFC North team. I don't know why my Albert Hainsworth keeps blocking everything. I hate this. The Vikings. Yeah, this is one. This is a offseason I actually don't mind. Even though they didn't do a lot, they were in cap hell. They had
Yep.
really bad cap space. They were not going to go out and sign a lot of crazy people. They restructured their cap pretty well. I like some of their re-signings. I like the Eric Wilson signing. He was really good with them last year. Really underrated, small acquisition for them. He comes in on a really solid contract. Bringing back Aaron Jones is interesting. I thought they would maybe want to upgrade in their running back room, but I'm not the biggest fan of that one. A couple of small ones, but then their two signings. Their two signings I really like. First one is James Pierre from Pittsburgh, 2 years, $8.5 million. Super low risk, high reward for a guy who actually played really well last year. Very underrated corner for Pittsburgh. Minnesota needs secondary depth. He has a chance to make a big time name for himself in Minnesota. I really like that signing. The other one, a lot of people love it, but I got to kind of, balance it, is Kyler Murray. Getting Kyler Murray for veteran minimum is fantastic, especially for a quarterback team like Minnesota. You have those concerns with 9 going into the season. Maybe Kyler Murray comes in and starts. I personally don't think that he will. I still think they're going to try to keep J.J. McCarthy as their starting quarterback, but if you get the chance, you get a former Pro Bowl quarterback who could come in, maybe play you some meaningful snaps, win you some games in a really tight competitive division. I think only thing I'll say is I think people are blowing it a little out of proportion because there's a reason Kyler Murray is on a veteran minimum for the Minnesota Vikings and not on his max contract with Arizona anymore. That you have to understand that perspective and the fact that the Vikings drafted a quarterback in the top 15. Yeah, sure, he was one of the worst quarterbacks in the league last year, but they're still going to really want to rely on him and give him a chance. So I think it's really fantastic. It's very similar to Atlanta. It's the exact same thing to the Atlanta Falcons with Tua. Really fantastic value signing, but it's kind of a disgraced former star quarterback coming in as your backup plan to a risky young quarterback who you're not sure. So I think honestly with what they did in the situation, I'm gonna give it like a B. It's again, they didn't do much. Did they upgrade their roster a lot? No. Did they have the room to? No. But I do like the signings and the value that they were able to add with the limited amount of space that they had.
Yeah, it's such an interesting way of looking at this roster. This roster is made for a win now mode. And you look at their quarterback situation and it's not a win now mode. This reminds me so much of last year Colts. Anthony Richardson's on the roster, a young, no top pick quarterback who was shown signs but was really consistent and was in and out of starting. They bring in last year they brought in Daniel Jones. This year Vikings are bringing in Kyle Murray. I do think Kyle Murray's going to start. I think that he's going to win the training camp, position. But I think here's the interesting part. Like how the Colts were last year, I think Daniel Jones doesn't quite move the needle enough to be in not just playoff condition, but potentially being Super Bowl ready. I think
Right.
Kyler Murray is a huge upgrade of JJ McCarthy, but I don't think he's good enough to take this roster to that promised land, which I think is just going to end up messing up this team even more. Because if Kyler Murray does play really
Wow.
well this year, like Daniel Jones did last year, new contract, and I don't think he's good enough to make him all the way. So they're going to be stuck again in that
In
situation
a
where they're
limbo, yeah.
exactly where they're not good enough to make it, not bad enough for another potential top quarterback pick. So I think it's going to be very, very similar to the Colts this past season.
It's a really interesting take, and I actually love that. I never really thought about that, but
Mm.
I mean, you're seeing what Indy's going through now. Thanks, Sauce Gardner. So, but yeah, I love that. But on to the next. Keep the train moving. The Nolan Saints, Josh, going down to Baton Rouge. Tell me what you think.
Well, they did a decent amount. There's really three big contracts that they made, and I kind of like them all. I think the biggest one is getting. Yes, I know he changed his last name. He says it's Travis Etienne. I'm going to call him Travis Etienne. He's been on the
Josh.
Jags for 4 years. It's something that I don't think I'm ever going to really be able to change. But Saints, who already had the most expensive running back room, double dip and they go and get one of the top running backs on the market. Travis Etienne, 4 year, about $52 million. I like this as a perfect complement to a guy like Tyler Shuck. You have a really young quarterback, and what's a young quarterback's best friend? That is a good offensive line and a stable running game. And that's one thing that they didn't have in Alvin Kamara last year. So I do think it is a lot of money for a guy that has had a big time injury in his past and has a lot of tread on his tires. But Travis Etienne is dynamic in every aspect of his game. So I like it as a player, not as much as a contract. After that, they also agreed with linebacker Caden Ellis, 3 year, $33 million. This is their Demario Davis kind of replacement. I like Caden Ellis if he can stay healthy. He's a really good player, extremely underrated, and he can kind of do a little bit of everything. So I do really like this pick. And then obviously another big one is offensive guard David Edwards, about $15 million per year. The Saints honestly have quietly produced a really, really good offensive line,
Yeah.
a really good young offensive line. So I like this. I mean, you're giving Tyler Shuck every ability, maybe not so much, you know, help with the receiver room, but a lot of potential help and ability to really see what he can do as a full season starter. So I do like this. I'm up there as an A minus B plus. I do think there's still a lot of holes, secondary especially, but offense you had huge upgrades.
Yeah, I actually, yeah, I really like some of these signings. I think the Travis Achan signing, again, they have been spilling over a bunch of mediocre running backs. Kendry Miller, Devin Neal, Alvin Kamara. Go for the big bucks, get a super dynamic guy who's good in the receiving game and rushing game for Tyler Shuck. It's a lot of money, though. It's a big contract for a running back. So I'm a little worried about that. Caden Ellis, I really like. He is older. I think he's close to 30, but really high quality starter. You need a Demario Davis replacement. Why not bring back a former face? I again, really good signing. I like that. My favorite is obviously addressing the trenches. Really close to Cade Mays, a really underrated signing. getting one of the premium guards in this free agency class in David Edwards. And you're right. This offensive line has quietly turned and could potentially be one of the better offensive lines in the league. They had Talise Fuaga. Kelvin Banks was unreal. Have Eric McCoy. You also have David Edwards, and then is it Cesar Ruiz? I
Caesar,
think.
the
No, he's
center
not a
position.
bad player. But I really, obviously, I wish they did more. And you were right. You still have a lot of holes to fill. Receiving room is probably the biggest one. You still have holes on the defensive line and in the secondary, and maybe even another linebacker. But for what they were able to get, the types of players they were able to get for the contracts they were able to get, I think they nailed it. I think they did a great job. I'm the only thing that scares me a little bit, kind of like Carolina, is that the Travis Etienne contract really scares me. But I think that the value is there, and you're getting a really productive players. So I'll give it an A-. All right, next one, another one with a lot of players. New York Football Giants. Yeah, this is pretty straight. Now, again, another solid class. Kind of go from the bottom, bringing in Jason Sanders as their biggest signing. Actually like the contract, good kicker. They had a lot of kicking woes last year, so it's good to kind of see some stability with that. A couple of depth wide receivers. Darnell Mooney could be a really sneaky one. 1 year, $10 million. He's could be your wide receiver 2 if you want to address that, but I think he's more of a wide receiver 3. Calvin Austin's a good special teamer. Marius Washington's a good depth signing. Go into some of the other things. Patrick Ricard, I love it, man. He's a unbelievable fullback. You talk about the identity of this team wanting to be super physical at the line of scrimmage. Ricard is your man. Him and Scat. Wow, that is going to be crazy.
Those are two thick white boys running the ball.
Hey, it's a white boy ground game. Greg Newsome, again, low risk, high reward signing. You know him. He's probably not the best corner, not going to be a corner one, but he's a good rotational guy to bring in, possibly trying to get a better contract in the future. Big signing with a punter, Jordan Stout, 3 years, $12.3 million. Again, addressing the special teams with money. But their 3 biggest contracts. One, and honestly, I like them all. First was their re-signing of Jermaine Illuminor. This is a slam dunk. Really good value for a guy who could have commanded a ton of money in free agency. You get him for 3 years, $39 million. Really fantastic right tackle for them. Was a slam dunk free agent signing when they got him. They needed to keep him, continue to build that offensive line. Great signing. Jermaine Edmonds, linebacker, was a big need. Get off the Bobby Okereke contract. Jermaine Edmonds still has a lot of left in the tank. It's a lot of money for him. To be your premier linebacker. I still think they need to add some depth with that, but I do like bringing him on because I still think he is a very high quality player for 3 years, $36 million. And the final one, another Ravens re-signing, Isaiah Likely, 3 years, $40 million. I'm not sure what to think about this. I like it and I don't. I think people are assuming Isaiah Likely is just this unbelievable player because of a couple of big time games and snaps, but he's never really had that premium tight end 1 role, and he's finally getting it. So this is a risky contract. I look at his game. You need another weapon for Dart. I think him and Theo Johnson could be a really underrated tight end duo because Theo Johnson actually wasn't that bad last year. But it is a lot of money for a guy who's not necessarily played at that premium tight end 1 role. So it definitely is a little bit of a risk, but hey, Jackson Dart needs weapons. He's going to be an excellent receiving weapon for Jackson Dart. Add another layer to that offense. I like what they did. I think you might have a couple of things you might want to address. Interior offensive line. Never mind. You brought back Evan Neal. So never mind on that. This guy, if you see his contract, it's insane.
0% guaranteed.
0% guaranteed. Wish him the best. It's crazy. Secondary, maybe. And then also, as I said, linebacker depth too. But I think they really plugged in some good holes here with what they had. So I'm kind of in the same. But I'm going to go with I think some of the contracts are a little valued. I think the Isaiah Likely signing is a little overrated. I'll give it a B+.
It's interesting. I'll say this. I like Isaiah Likely getting by a 3 or $40 million compared to what Daniel Bellinger got with the Titans. So you get 3 or 25, something like that. So the skill set between the two and the production and the players themselves, I love that, like, the contract compared to the Bellinger. The Tremaine Edmonds is not my favorite. Yes, he had a lot of picks last year, but the stat box doesn't quite show everything. He had a very down year. I do like them. There's a few things that I do really like. Ardarius Washington, safety from
Yep.
the Ravens. I love that as a Dane Belton replacement, someone that's a lot cheaper. Has been injured a lot throughout his career, but when he does play, he is not only versatile, but is a really good player. Resigning Micah McFadden, another player that I really like for them. And lastly, Alvin Austin, wide receiver from the Steelers. He is a speedster. He can help out not only Jackson Dart with the deep his deep balls, but as well as the run game.
Yeah.
Really keep those safeties at bay. As those short game and running plays can really develop both play action, and getting Jackson Dart and that running ability. Patrick Ricard is kind of interesting. I like it as a trench player. Um, Patrick Ricard played almost 70% of his snaps at tight end last year.
Really?
That's where he started the play, and then he would, of course, motion out in space or motion back, but he played a lot at tight end. So just
Hmm.
adding more depth, more versatility on offense is something that I love. So you still have a lot of holes. So I'm right there with him, kind of at a B minus situation.
Okay. Okay. Well, another one, maybe question. That's the birds. Go birds. Philadelphia Eagles, Josh. Walk me through
Yeah, looking at this, there's a lot. There's
it.
a few things I really like. You go and you extend Jordan Davis through your 78 million. That is a lot of money, especially when you have Jalen Carter right there on his heels. Jordan Davis has not necessarily, he has played so much better throughout his career, but he has really come into himself as a player. Drafted, he was this huge guy, could really only stay in the field for a handful of plays before he had to be subbed out. Conditioning his body, I think, is really deserving of this contract. I also really like this Tariq Woolen signing.
Yeah.
1 year, 12 million. I think there are times last year where Tariq Woolen struggled as that bona fide, cornerback one, but he's at a place where you have Quinyon Mitchell, you have, Cooper DeJean if he plays that slot safety. Tariq Woolen doesn't have to be cornerback one. He can kind of play his area and be a good complement to Quinyon Mitchell. Wide receiver, they also brought in Marquise Brown. This is just a band-aid of what Jahan Dotson was last year. They're just really trying to just rotate that receiver three. I think he can make some good deep plays every once in a while. He's not a consistent playmaker. They re-signed Dallas Goedert. I thought it was a great, 1-year deal. He signed a lot of tight ends. Johnny
Yeah.
Munt, Stone Smart, Ryan Calcaterra. But it was really just that re-signing Jordan Davis that I really like. Tariq Woolen, and I'm assuming that they are getting ready to extend Derek Carter as well. And there's still question marks about AJ Brown in that receiver room.
Yeah. I mean, I think for what they did, I think they did a good job. Jordan Davis, yeah, deserves it. Great player. It's going to be really interesting to see because there were talks about possibly trading Jalen Carter. And again, that's a lot of money to pay two defensive tackles. So, and you just saw what Dallas did when they paid both theirs. The tight ends kind of band aiding. Bring back Dallas Goddard. I feel like they just weren't, they were just like, yeah, we might as well bring him back for one more year. How bad could it be? Tariq Woolen, this is just an obvious case of, him trying to get on a bigger contract with a chance. He just really seems like a Philadelphia Eagle, if you catch what I mean. Just fits it, but he's going to be a very high quality cornerback too for them next to Quinyon Mitchell. That's an upgrade. The only thing is there's still a lot of questions I have, specifically pass rush. You lose your premier pass rusher in Jalen Phillips. What do you do? Because listen, I know Arnold Ibikide, I don't think is going to be your pass rusher number one, who they just signed. There's some questions with that. And then the receiving room too. Again, Marquise Brown, band-aid on the wide receiver three. What do you do with AJ Brown is a big question. Another one to look out for is offensive line. Your guys are getting old. Those guys are getting old, and you got to find some guys to kind of develop in the future. So I don't mind it. I still think they did lose some pretty quality guys, but I like what they did. So I'm gonna give it. I think I'm gonna give it like a B. I'm gonna give it a B.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. I think they don't have to go out and get 4 tight ends. I also don't think Dameon Pierce is a guy that they necessarily need. I mean, they have Tank Bigsby. I think you can use those contracts a little bit, and you can find another player to potentially upgrade at one of those positions. I think kind of like how the Packers were in a lot of teams, obviously you lose Nakobe Dean, but if Jahad Campbell is able to completely come back from that injury that he suffered this past season, he can be what Nakobe Dean was plus more.
Right.
So I
Oh
think that's
yeah, of
something
course.
I'm sure it's something a lot of people are kind of talking about is, oh, you lose Nakobe Dean, what do you have now? Well, Jahad Campbell, younger, faster, has that potential to be so much more.
Exactly. Exactly, man. Exactly. Um, yeah, another team. We keep it rolling. We keep it moving. The San Francisco 49ers. They did a surprising amount. Couple of re-signings. I like that they brought back Eddie Pinheiro and Jake Tongas, two solid depth pieces, as well as Luke Gifford. I think I predicted that. Not to brag. Really like the Osa Digizua trade. You just need bodies on that defensive line. He is immediately your defensive tackle number one. I think it's a perfect value for him. Perfect value. Third round pick. Nothing crazy. You could definitely do a lot worse with a third round pick than Osa Digizua. I think it's a great trade for San Francisco to bolster that defensive line. Looking at their offseason additions, you bring in Nate Hobbs. Yeah, nothing crazy. Low risk, high reward signing. Kind of a depth piece for corners. These are the two biggest ones. I think first is Vendarian Lowe. I actually like this. He was a really good swing tackle for New England. 2 years, 12 million. I know there's some concern with Trent Williams. He's old. He's a really solid swing tackle for a team that gets beat up so much. He's a great depth piece for that. I really like that signing. And I would say this is probably the most 49ers signing I've ever seen is Mike Evans. I was super surprised with it. I thought he was staying in Tampa. I really
Yeah,
did, but
it's going to be
um,
hard to see him in
it's
a
going to be
49ers
hard.
jersey.
Yeah, 3 years up to 60.4 million, but only 16.3 million guaranteed. So it's not crazy. It's a lot of money though for a guy coming off of a big time injury, and he's also really old. This is, again, they need bodies in the receiver room. This is an immediate upgrade. This is to me a very high risk, high reward signing. This isn't prime Mike Evans. He's got to be 30 plus years old, coming off of a bad injury, but immediately plugs and plays as your wide receiver one. Immediately a big time target for Brock Purdy, something they haven't had since, Brandon Ayuk before he went off the rails. So yeah, adding weapons for Brock Purdy in a division where you are desperately trying to contend. This is a contending move. This is what you got to do in these kind of divisions. Am I the biggest fan of it? No, but I like what their head's at with it, and I could definitely see it working out as either he gets really beat up and is kind of past his prime, or and kind of the San Francisco way, or he's Mike Evans. He's a fantastic receiver for them. Gets maybe 1 or 2 1,000-yard seasons with Brock Purdy. So overall, I do like some of the signings, some of the value, what they did. I still think, again, I still have some questions with some of the things that they are going to go forward with. I still think you still could possibly still address the receiver room, add a younger body in there. Offensive line's a big question. So overall, I do like I'm a big fan of the Osa Vendarian Lowe signings there, so I'm going to give it a B.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's so interesting to me. This 49ers team doesn't necessarily have huge holes. Now, they played really well last year. Their biggest issues were injuries. And what's so funny to me is, you know, three of the four biggest guys that they get have had big time
Yep.
injuries. Obviously, Mike Evans, Christian Kirk had
Oh,
like it
that's right,
was
Christian Kirk. Yeah.
Yep, had another big injury. Was dealing with injuries all last year, and especially last year at the Jags. And then Drew Greenlaw. Obviously, there was the big Achilles injury in the Super Bowl, as well as in and out of the lineup with the Broncos. Those three players are going to, I think, is truly a cursed franchise when it comes to injuries.
Yeah.
Sure, is it electric currents on the field, whatever it is. If these players are able to stay healthy, which I just don't know is even physically possible, this could be a really, really good class.
Yes.
I think this is a huge upgrade of receiver room from last year. Mike Evans, Ricky Pearsall, Christian Kirk is a huge upgrade of Jawan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, and Kendrick Bourne. I think they're a lot more dynamic this year if they are able to stay healthy. Drew Greenlaw had his best years with the 49ers next to Fred Warner. Bosa is able to really enforce a good interior pressure that they haven't quite had since Javon Hargrave.
Mhm.
So if they're able to stay healthy, which you can never truly predict,
Especially with the Niner. It's so
I
you're
know.
right. It's like a match made in heaven.
Yeah, I know. If they're able to stay healthy, which I mean, who knows is even humanly, physically possible. I really like this class.
Yeah.
So
It's a
I'm
big
right there.
if. Big if.
It's a big if. I'm right there at kind of an A range, to be truthful with you.
Really? Wow. I
So,
could maybe bump it up to a B plus, but I do think injuries play a
mhm.
kind of factor with it. But yeah. Well, how about their rival? A little different offseason for them. Seattle Seahawks. Walk me through it.
Yeah, there's a lot. Obviously, there's the Super Bowl tax, which, if you're not familiar with that, is you're going to lose a lot of players. There's no, even though they had 81 million, I believe, in free agency, you cannot keep everyone. But with the people that they did keep, I liked. You brought in you re-signed Rashid Shaheed, 3 year, about 51 million. I like that. Not only does he bring, explosive on offense, but especially in that special teams. As a receiver, he didn't do quite as much with the Seahawks as he did with the Saints,
Mm-hmm.
but his impact alone on special teams is worth a lot of that contract. I'll get to Jason soon, but another big one is they got Jake Bobo back. The Jags tried to come over and grab him as a restricted free agent, and they kept him 2 year, 5.5 million. They re-signed some other kind of smaller players. Josh Jones, Noah Bugnogany, they re-signed, but it's this big one. Jackson Smith and Jigba, 4 years, $68.6 million extension for the offensive player of the year. That's 40. It's like what, 42.1 or right under
Yeah.
42.1 million. Jackson Smith and Jigba is a fantastic player. He showed that he is so versatile and able to do so much. Do I think he is a top 3 receiver in this league? It's close. I'm not sure, but I do think he is top 5. I do think that contract is worth the impact that he had just last year.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, here's the interesting thing. And what I learned was he still has 2 years left on his rookie contract.
Mhm.
And so it's really, you don't see that a lot. You're paying that much. So there's definitely risk to it. He's coming off his biggest season. I get it though, because listen, value contracts is just going to continue to go up. Might as well strike it while the iron's hot. Wasn't going to go for any cheaper. It's a lot. You're paying a lot to this receiving core. The Rashid Shaheed contract, like bringing him back, but that is a ton of money.
It's a lot of money
For basically a premier special teams player, 3 years, 51 million. Yeah, he's a great downfield receiver, but and great special teamer. Doesn't do much else, and you're paying him 35 million guaranteed. Like that you bring him back, do not like the contract. Rest of the guys I really get behind. Love bringing back Josh Jobe. 3 years, 24 million. Has a chance to replace Tariq Woolen. Really good value signing. Same thing with Drake Thomas. 2 years, 8 million. Great linebacker next to Ernest Jones. Really cheap deal. Jake Bobo, kind of the same thing. Couple other, ones like Josh Jones. But the other thing is, obviously you have the Super Bowl tax. They lost a lot of players. We talked about a bunch of them. Boye Mafe, Kenneth Walker, Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen. There are questions, right? How are they going to go and address these positions? Running back is big. Secondary is big too, The other interesting thing is they're going to, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with their cap space as well, because they've been throwing out extensions. They signed Charles Cross. They just signed Jackson Smith-Njigba, and there's another guy for Seattle. Devon Witherspoon, who's probably going to get a massive contract, very well deserved too. So I think that Seattle is in a little bit of a contract bind. I get it. Bring back as many of your players for relatively cheap contracts. But whether you like it or not, this team did regress. They did regress from their Super Bowl form. So I got to get, unfortunately, even though I like some of their re-signings, they lost a lot of players and they didn't gain a lot of new faces, and they got to pay out a lot of money in the future. I think there's some big questions. So I'm giving this like a C minus.
Okay.
C minus, because C minus D plus, because it's how it works. But unfortunately, it's just this team got worse, did not get better. But at least you're able to kind of scrape some of the guys that you wanted to bring back.
No, for sure. And I do want to harp on this real fast. An underrated signing that can really impact this team is Emmanuel Wilson, running back from the Packers. I mean, obviously, I've seen him a few different times. There were times last year where he outplayed Josh Jacobs.
Yeah.
I hate to say that, but Zach Charbonnet will be out all next year, so that's your power back. And Emmanuel Wilson is that down the hill running physical bruiser that will take at least those snaps, if not potentially running back one snaps next season for this Super Bowl winning Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, he's an interesting player. He had some really good games. He also had he kind of got his chance to play and played really well. He was very much of a bell cow guy when he got the chance. The thing is he's very, to me, a little similar to Charbonnet, where he's not like that guy who's gonna be like Kenneth Walker and make those massive shifty cuts and make those big moves. Much more of a physical
Down to two more,
down to
right?
two more.
Yeah.
Big one. Taking the Tampa Bay Bucks. Yeah, this is an offseason. I said it before. Tampa Bay doesn't spend a lot of money. Some interesting ones. I like bringing back Sean Tucker. Think that's a great re-signing. Pete Otten, he's a fine player. A lot of money
A
for a
lot of
guy
money.
who's probably a middle of the pack to below average tight end. $20 million guaranteed. So they're going to be expecting a lot from him. Their soft season signings I actually do like. Al-Qadim Muhammad, 1 year up to $6 million. You forget this guy had 10 and a half
Double-digit
sacks last year.
Yeah.
So that's a really good contract value for a guy who's 30, coming off a career year. Great, could be a fantastic rotational defensive end, which is what he is. Really think that's a very underrated contract. The other two really solid contracts. Kenneth Gainwell, 2 years, $14 million. Perfect response to losing Rachaad White, one of the best receiving backs in the NFL. Perfect compliment to Bucky Irving. Yeah, he's your basic Rachaad. I think he's a better Rachaad White replacement for good value of a contract. And then finally, Alex Anzalone. This is even better with Levante David retiring. Is he a premier linebacker? No, but he's a quality starter who is excellent with leadership. It's a great way to replace Levante David, and a good value too. 2 years, $17 million for him. But again, this is a scenario where I look at the signings. I like the signings. I don't know what direction this team is going in because they have a lot of holes to fill, a lot of question marks. And they lost a lot of key players. You lose Mike Evans, you lose Rachaad White, you lose Jamel Dean, which I think is going to be a really tough one to fill. You have a lot of questions. You have questions on every single aspect of the defense, offensive line, linebacker, and secondary. Offensively, you draft Emeka Ibuka, but you trust your other guys to play, offensive line, same thing. So I like the signings that they made, but I just look at their division. I don't think they did enough to make themselves a better team than where they were beforehand. But like I said, I like the value and the quality of the signings that they made. So that's why I give them probably a C plus to a B minus.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. The contracts that they gave out are great contracts. The only one that's a little iffy is Ashawn Robinson, who 1 year, $10 million. It's a lot of money for D lineman that's never been the premier guy. Yes, he's great run stuffing. He applies a little bit of pressure, pass rush, but he's not a downgrade of Logan Hall from last year with them. And he'll be their third, big man D tackle defensive end that they have behind Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey. And that's if they don't even go back and double dip in D-line again, which they should. Al-Qadim Muhammad, I love that. 1 year's up to $6 million. He's a guy that can kind of play inside out, can even be stand-up if needed to be. Kenneth Gainwell, I mean, this guy had over 1,000 scrimmage yards last year. One of the most underrated. I almost hate to call him a running back. It's kind of like a scat back. Can play all over receiver. Can even play slot if needed to.
Yeah.
Anzalone, it's a good contract, especially with Levante David returning. It still is a fantastic contract. But now it's a desperate need, and there needs to be another player through the draft or late end free agency that needs to come in and, if not, start at least compete. But there still is a lot of holes. I don't think Chris Godwin is what he was 2 years ago, or even what his contract is. Emeka Ibuka had a lot of concerns down the stretch. Baker Mayfield a lot of concerns down the stretch. Offensive line has dealt with a lot of injuries. Pass rush is non-existent. Linebackers, Devontae David retired. Secondary, Jamel Dean's gone. You're banking on Robert Parrish and Benjamin Morrison, two guys that are very young and have
Yep.
up and down seasons. There's a lot. Looking at this, I think it's a downgrade of what they had last year. And last year, they were one of the biggest disappointments of a team down the stretch.
Yeah.
They have a lot to go to. I agree with you. I'm not quite sure what their vision is. I think their biggest need right now is a new head coach. I don't think Todd Bowles is the answer to what this team is.
Stroke
I think
the flames, Josh. Stroke the flames.
Do believe a new head coach is the biggest mistake, or the lack of a new head coach is the biggest mistake that happened this offseason for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, I agree. But we get another year of Todd Bowles. How much fun is that? Yay.
Oh,
And Baker Mayfield is on the last year of his contract too, so that's another thing to look at. But yeah, certainly some questions with the Pirates. But big splash for the last team. I'll have you take it away. The Commanders. Walk me through it.
Yeah, there's a lot on this team. Where do I even start? I think I'm going to start with this. This is a team that desperately needed pass rush help. I think it was very clear from the beginning that Von Miller was not going to return to this team. And whose replacement, they got two guys that their best aspects gave to the quarterback. Clayvon Chason had a huge, even realistically the last 2 years, career revival with the Raiders and the Patriots. So he signed a 1 year, $12 million, can be that stand-up, weak side, outside linebacker. And then the big one, Odafe Owe. Yeah, sorry. Pause there. 4 year, 100, the Chargers last year. I know you're kind of banking on that potential in the future. It's a lot of money. And when he was able to really excel, last year he was not the premier pass rusher, wasn't the premier pass rusher one. So that scares me. Other than that, they also had a few other signings that I really like. Leo Chanel, weird $24.75 million. I love this signing.
Yeah.
Him and Frankie Louvu are the two most versatile starting middle linebackers in the league. They can do, and they can have huge impacts in all three phases of the game. Rushing the quarterback, stopping the run, and in the pass coverage. I love that for him. Tim Settle, big D tackle, 3 year, $24 million. It's a lot of money for a guy that's just a pretty good run stuffer. It's a lot of money. I think it's mostly just showing that their recent draft picks have not necessarily hit. I'm looking at you, Johnny Newton.
No, he had his moment. He had like a 3-sack game.
Yeah, that's that's about it. Got a few pair of, safeties and corners. Eric Robinson, 2 years, $16 million. It's a lot of money for a guy that gives up a lot of yards, but he does have that dog in him, and this is what this defense needs. Nick Cross from the Colts, 2 years, $14 million. I really like this. A fantastic contract for a player that's has been really consistent throughout his career. Really like that. And to finish it off, Chig Okonkwo, I also really like, 3 years, $30 million. I think everybody now knows what you get with a player like him. He's not going to be that inline blocker. He's going to be a dynamic weapon, both at that tight end position as well as that Z, that kind of slot, as a big slot. So I do really like that, especially with a team that is desperate in need of wide receiver help. You now have a big time, end zone threat, big rack tight end with Chig Okonkwo.
Perfect summary, man. And I think there's a lot of risk. I think they're throwing out, this is a risky offseason. It's what they needed to do. Laramie Tunsil, 2 years, $60 million. A lot of money, but left tackles are so important. He's one of the best. Still is. I think that's a great re-signing for them, for Jaden Daniels. Yeah, I guess I'll kind of go in your order. Pass rush. This is a really risky pass rush offseason. Clayvon Chason and Odafe Owe to me are the definitions of just big risk. They can play really well. Clayvon Chason, very slow start to his career. Hope you're keeping that signed sports card.
I have it somewhere.
You never know. He could really start stacking it up, but we'll talk about that one later. That's an inside joke. But yeah, a lot of money for a guy who really kind of became that premier guy in the playoffs. Odafe Owe, the same thing. super explosive, had very up and down career, had one really good year with the Ravens where he had about 10.5 sacks, then dipped, then immediately went back up with the Chargers. I've liked him. Again, freakishly athletic, super fast pass rushers. Tim Settle on the interior defensive line. They have a really big interior defensive line. That's what they're going for. Fast on the outside, big on the inside. Leo Chanel is probably my favorite contract of the bunch. Isn't necessarily a full-time starter, so he gets that chance too. But when he has been on the field, he's been fantastic. Linebacker's been a massive need for them. I think he could be a really, really good player in this system. Chigoziem Okonkwo, give Jane Daniels some more weapons. Finally give him a good tight end weapon to use. Chigoziem, you see flashes from him of a guy. It rings very similar to me, like Isaiah Likely, where you see him and you're like, man, this guy has some flash. He can play, but he hasn't fully put it together. And then the Nick Cross one, first of all, Amik Robertson, he's kind of burnt toast at corner a lot. So I don't really like the money on the contract, but he is a really good tackling corner, and they had a lot of issues with tackling last year. Give them corner depth is something they desperately need. They're probably still going to need it. And then Nick Cross, plug and play starter, immediately helps that safety room out, and for really cheap for what I was expecting him to go for. So overall, I think you're right. I think this free agents, they did a lot, but I think there's a lot of risk attached to this. And I mean, you look at what I have right here. Usually it hasn't worked out very well for the Commanders in free agency, but I think that there's a chance that this could really help elevate their defense because they got so many players that just have had so many unbelievable flashes. Man, I respect them for going out and spending big money trying to help Jaden Daniels on his rookie contract. So I'll give it a B+.
Yeah, hopefully in 10 years we don't have, Odafe Owe behind you in a screensaver. So another $100 million players.
You got Albert Hainsworth, you got Adam Archuleta, you got Landon Collins, and you got Odafe Owe. I mean, I hope it's not that, but my friend, we just did it. We wrapped up every single team's free agency and free agency grades and analysis. How are you feeling, man?
Oh, I am overstimulated. I am tired, but I'm so happy to be here.
This is awesome, man.
Oh, yeah.
It certainly has not been the most eventful free agency for both of our teams, but there are a lot of, this free agency class to me was not the best, but there were some teams that went out and spent a ton of money and really just broke the bank on some big time players. And I think there is a chance there could be a lot of unsung heroes in this free agency as well. So we'll have to wait and see. But as of now, we turn our attention probably to what else teams are going to do with the NFL draft. Oh man,
Sure.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I know it's another long episode, but we do love free agency. We'll probably still talk about it more. Let us know what you guys think. What do you think of the grades? Any things that we missed? Any things that you disagree on or hate or love? If you want to spread some love to us. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Josh, thank you.
James, you too. And, everybody, follow all the socials, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram.
Yep.
All of those. And let us know who you want your team to.
Yeah, that's true. That's true too. Like, give us some positional needs and stuff. But we got to shout the socials, man. But Josh, thank you so much for being on the pod today with me again, and thank me so much for being on the pod with you today. You have a great rest of your night, man. Get some good sleep.
You too, James. I'm ready to play a game next week.
Scary. I love it. I'll catch you later, Josh.
I'll catch you later, James.